Hi, I'm Whitney Milberger with the North Fort Bend Water Authority. Today we're at Enchanted Gardens. It's one of my most favorite places in the world. So it's a place that carries a lot of native and adapted plants. And when I want to go shopping, but especially if I want to feel serenity or if I want to feel peace, I come here. They have a diversity of colors, different items for the garden, and they have very knowledgeable staff that can help you decide what's best for your garden. Let's talk about pruning. This is to help the shaping, to help the growth, the overall nourishment of a plant. I think about it as getting our hair cut, right? We have to cut our hair to help encourage growth. So we're gonna start with trees. Trees can be tricky. The best time to prune trees is typically in the fall, but it's very important because trees are so massive and there are a couple techniques that you have to be aware of. I highly recommend if you're going to do heavy pruning of a tree, you contact a certified arborist to help you. Now, one of my biggest pet peeves, and I have to tell you about it, is crepe myrtles. So crepe myrtles are the large shrubs, small trees we see everywhere in the medians, and a lot of us have them in the yard. So crepe myrtles, you'll see a lot of people just hack the top of those off in the fall and the winter. Don't do that, please. In college, we actually had a campaign with bumper stickers that said, "Stop crepe myrtle mutilation." So when you do that, it encourages suckers, like little plants from the bottom, to come up and grow. And then also you don't get that beautiful, large trunk that crepe myrtles have the potential to have when you hack them. So let your crepe myrtles be. You could do minor modifications to it, but never go through and hack those. So that's with trees. The best time of the year to prune is going to be in the spring or in the fall. Now, people usually ask me about the winter, what do I do? For me, in my yard, when things that are perennials and they die back during the fall, they go dormant. A lot of mine I will actually take down to the ground because I like to encourage more full growth in the spring when they come up. During the spring and the fall though, sometimes I do want to help shape them as we go. So right here, I have a salvia. And when we look at this salvia, there's a certain way you want to cut it. So every time these two leaves come together, that right there is called a node. So every time you cut, i.e. prune, you're going to want to cut directly above the node. So that point where the leaves come together and you can feel a little nodule, you always cut at the node, and that's going to help encourage growth. When you look at grasses, ornamental grasses, they're very easy to shape. The reason why grasses are really hardy and they're easy with your maintenance and everything is because they have a very fibrous root system, okay? They have massive roots underneath the soil. So they could take a lot of pruning. They could take a lot of damage. And that's why they're so great for here. So when I want to say this is a purple fountain grass, when I want to modify the shape, or if it's just getting way too big for my area, if it's covering up something else I want to show off, I can literally take my shears and I can just shape it like that. You don't have to worry because the nodes, as we call them, that are on these are at the bottom right before that fibrous root system begins. We want to first start by talking about when to plant our plants. So for perennials and for shrubs and large shrubs, the best time to plant is in the spring or in the fall. When we talk about trees, generally the best time to plant trees is in the fall. But all trees are different, okay? So make sure you talk to a certified arborist before you actually decide when to plant a tree. When we talk about turf grass, it goes the same way along with perennials. The best time to plant turf grass is in the spring or in the fall again. We don't plant anything in the summer because just like us being outside, when it is too hot, plants do not like it, and none of us are a glutton for punishment. Now we're going to talk about my favorite, which is turfgrass. A lot of people are scared of turfgrass, but I'm going to tell you this, if there's one plant you can grow successfully, it's this. So we're going to look at two of the most common types of turfgrass there are. Here we have St. Augustine and we have Bermuda. We're going to talk about how can you tell the difference? How do I know which one I have? So your St. Augustine grass, it's going to have these thicker leaves. St. Augustine grass is going to grow in the shade or in the sun. And on the root system, we have what we call stolons. These are these above ground roots. So when you look at St. Augustine, there's just these little runners, as we call them, that are on top. So there's no roots that are actually underneath the soil. When we look at a Bermuda grass typically only grows in the sun, okay? So Bermuda is going to have the thinner leaf. And when you look at it, it has what we call the stolons, which are the above ground roots. And then we also have below ground roots. So you have roots that are growing underneath the soil. One thing that we think of is water usage. Turfgrass needs a lot of water, right? Turfgrass actually doesn't need as water. It's going to take as much water as you give it. But if you start getting it too much water, you're going to have a problem with depleting the root zone. There's no oxygen left in the root zone. So it'll take it, but it'll only take it to a point until you get what we call waterlogged roots, and then it's not going to be happy. And one thing that people commonly mistake is too much water from too little water. The best thing I do to tell if my lawn needs to be watered, I always wait until I see that dull look going to it and I start to see that wilt. If I know that I'm in a heat spell and I'm familiar with how much I'm watering, I typically know that I'm going to only irrigate twice a week. If I've had some rain spells and there is maybe moisture in the soil, I literally check the soil. So I'll take a screwdriver and I will poke down. I will see if that top 6 inches of the soil actually does have any moisture in it. So because what you want to do before you irrigate, you want to make sure that that moisture in the soil is actually depleting. It's actually going lower, because you don't want to keep that moisture level constant, because then again, you're going to get those yellow to brown roots that we talked about earlier. Let's say you have a bare spot in your yard and you need to fill it in. So how much do you get? So each one of these squares that we're looking at is 18 by 24 inches. So that's 1.5 feet by 2 feet. So that's going to help you measure it out. Say you have a very large area and you're wondering, how many of those pallets do I get? One of those pallets is 450 square feet. So as long as you measure your yard, you'll know how much to buy, so you won't buy too little and you won't buy too much. The best time to plant turfgrass is going to be in the spring or in the fall. So we don't want to plant sod in the summer because you're stressing it, it's too hot, it's gonna be very hard for those roots to actually encourage growth. So when you do plant sod, there's some tips that you should take into consideration to help you get it established. So first, when you're getting the area ready, really important is getting the area ready, right? You want to make sure you have a very solid, a very clean surface, okay? You want to make sure it's tilled up a bit, right? Because you want those roots to really get in there and start to grow. So you get it all tilled up, and then you even it out. And then right before you come to lay each square, you're going to wet it a little bit. We're not going to drown it. We're just going to wet it a little bit. And then you start laying. You lay one direction, however far you need to go, the same way. So if you're doing vertical, you go vertical, 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 okay? Then when you start on the next row, you want to make it like a brick and mortar pattern. So you want to stagger the pieces. You don't want seam to seam at any time. So when you do that, because you really want those seams to grow together, whenever you have them parallel, they're going to struggle to do that. So you're always wanting to do a staggered figuration whenever you're laying your sod. After you lay your sod, it's very important to water it in. So I don't ever talk about watering a whole lot, but this is the one time when you really need to, for about 3 to 4 days, okay? So after you do it, you really have to saturate that in. You're going to want to really saturate it in, and I'm talking about where when you step on it, you can feel the sogginess. You're going to do that for about 3 to 4 days. After that, you start backing off. After that, and depending on the time of the year also, so again, talk to your local garden nursery expert. You're going to want to back off, because that's whenever you're encouraging the root growth. If you're just nurturing it and nurturing it, it has no reason to learn on its own. And yes, I just acted like turf was a person, but that's because this is what I do. So anyways, what you're going to do is you're going to back off. You're going to wait 3 to 4 days. You're going to get it some water, and then it's going to start establishing. And then after that, when we get into the warmer months, when we get into the summer, you're going to have that establishment if you've done it correctly. And then you're going to be able to irrigate if there's no rain about twice a week, which we'll talk about in a little bit, how much to actually water. And you're going to have a healthy yard as long as you're following a good watering and maintenance program. We're going to talk about turf grass fertilization. So whenever we look at a turf grass fertilizer bag, there's those scary 3 numbers, right? But they're not so scary, so we're going to talk about what those numbers mean, and we're going to talk about how to pick a right one for your yard, and it's going to make it easier for you in the future. So we have those 3 numbers. That first one is nitrogen. Nitrogen is pertinent for any kind of plant growth, especially for turf grass. Nitrogen is very important for green up, for establishment, and for density. That's the first number. Second one we look at is phosphorus. Phosphorus is important, especially in plants. It's a macronutrient, so it is very important for turf grass, but it comes in a lower number. Because the purpose of phosphorus is to help encourage bloom, to help encourage that. So we're really looking at that when we talk about plants, not so much as turf grass. On that last one, we have potassium. So potassium, again, is very important, just like nitrogen, for green up and for density, but it's also very important for water uptake. Now we know that turf grass does need some water, so making sure you pay special attention to that third number is pertinent. Talk about when to plant our plants, our turf grass, and our trees. So the best time to plant any of our perennials, any of our shrubs, is going to be in the spring or in the fall. When we're looking at trees, generally it's in the fall, but you're going to want to check with an arborist to make sure on that. When we talk about turf grass, it's going to be in the spring or the fall also. When you're picking out the fertilizer for turf grass, there's a ratio that you want to follow, and that's a 3-1-2. So as long as you do the math, it's going to work out. Another thing that I want to make sure you're aware of is sometimes you'll see stores sell these immediate release nitrogen fertilizers, and it's very, if you're not a farmer growing turf grass, things like that, it could be very detrimental to your yard, because these can actually burn your yard. So anytime you buy a fertilizer, you want to make sure it's a slow release. And what that means is throughout the season, it's going to keep feeding and it's going to keep helping your yard. Looking at our yards, at our houses, we have low to medium standards, unless we're going for yard of the year, and we'll talk about that too. But it's pertinent to actually fertilize 2 times a year. The first one is spring, right? Because our sod, our turf grass has been sleeping, it's waking up from dormancy, and it's gonna start growing, it's gonna start stressing when that heat comes. So it needs to have some nutrients in the roots to keep it going throughout the season. So we always do a spring one, and then the most important one is the fall one. So in the fall, it's very important to get that 3-1-2 ratio we talked about on it again, because so those nutrients can help help the starches and everything in the soil survive while it's sleeping. So 2 times a year for a low to moderate yard. If you are going for that yard of the year, you could do a maintenance fertilizer in the summer. Again, it's summer, it's hot, your turf grass does have the potential to burn. So when you do this, you want to make sure you pick a slow release fertilizer. Weeds are not our best friends, so we want to find a way to control them. A very effective way to control the weeds is with landscape fabric. Using landscape fabric and then a maximum of 3 inches of mulch above the fabric does help. I am not going to get into the debate of organic versus inorganic pesticides. To each his own. But if you do choose to use inorganics, meaning the chemicals, you must read the label. You must follow the law. If you choose to use organics and you're not sure which one to use, again, talk to local garden expert. They're going to have the best recommendations on which one you should use. Okay, don't hate me, but the most effective weed control for turf grass is mowing. The more we mow, the more dense the turf grass is going to be. Therefore, weeds cannot infiltrate through to reach the sunlight. I recommend mowing once a week during the summer months. In the fall and in the spring, it depends on what our weather conditions are, right? But I recommend once every 2 weeks or so. And in the winter, there is no need to mow because the grass is dormant and it's not growing. Times of the year and when to water. There is no need to water our plants from the months of November through March. You do not need to have that sprinkler controller on at all. Sometimes it even goes through April. You have to use your gut and know when the temperatures are really warming up and you're starting to see that grass curl a little bit. So in my plants and in my landscape, I'll generally water about once a week when those temperatures start getting above, say, 85 to 90. So because our warm season plants, they actually start growing when those soil temperatures go right above 70 degrees. So I'll start watering about once a week whenever those temperatures start to rise. And then when I get into the hottest months, and I'm talking July and August, that's when I'm irrigating max 2 times a week. And that sounds scary because we want to just water, right? But the more we water, the less roots we're going to have. And so we really want to encourage that deep root growth. And the only way to do that is by infrequent and deep waterings, using that cycle and soak, making sure you're applying the correct amount of water. And that's the best way to encourage growth. At my house, personally, I have St. Augustine grass and I have shade. I have encouraged a deep root growth in my grass. The house was built in the 70s, and so it's been growing for a long time. I have not watered my grass in 3 years. And that is because of the deep-rooted system that I've encouraged, and it's been able to grow over the years. Another water conservation initiative you may be eligible for is the Residential Water Conservation Rebate. Items such as smart sprinkler controllers and nozzles fall within this program. Participate, and you can receive money back on your water bill. Visit the website for more details. Thank you for touring Enchanted Gardens with me today. I hope you learned something from these videos. Happy planting.